June 2nd, 2007, 7 o'clock in the evening. In Overland Park, Kansas, security cameras inside a Target store are capturing something that, at first glance, looks completely ordinary. An 18-year-old girl moves through the aisles with the easy confidence of someone who has done this 1,000 times before. She picks up a gift for her boyfriend. She chats briefly with the cashier. She smiles. She pays. She walks back out to her car. Nobody watching that footage that night could have imagined what was about to happen next. Nobody could have known that this casual, 10-minute shopping trip would be the last time anyone who loved her would see Kelsey Smith alive. That Saturday afternoon, Kelsey's dad, Greg Smith, an off-duty police officer, was having what seemed like a regular weekend with his wife Missy and their daughter. Kelsey had plans that evening. She was supposed to meet her boyfriend John, and the two of them were celebrating their 6-month anniversary. She needed to pick up a gift for him, so she drove to the Target store not far from their home. She expected it to be quick, there and back, nothing more. She arrived at the Target parking lot at 6:54 in the evening. She got out of her car, walked into the store, picked out what she needed, had a brief, easy conversation with the cashier, and headed back outside. 10 minutes. That is all it took. And in those 10 minutes, something else was happening just outside. Something none of the store's 40 surveillance cameras caught clearly enough. Something that would take investigators more than a full day to piece together. When John arrived at the Smith house around 7:30 that evening, Kelsey was not there. At first, it barely registered as anything alarming. Maybe she got stuck in traffic. Maybe she stopped somewhere else. But then the minutes started ticking by, and the calls she had coming in from both John and her father were going completely unanswered. For Greg Smith, a police officer by training and by instinct, 30 minutes of silence from his daughter was not a cause for mild concern. It was a flashing alarm. Because Kelsey simply did not do this. She did not go silent. She did not leave people wondering. So Greg started making calls of his own. Not to report her missing, not yet, but using his experience as a cop to reach out to different police departments in the area and ask whether there had been any accidents involving her car, any contact with her license plate number. There was nothing. No accidents, no contact, nothing. Another 30 minutes passed. Greg, Missy, and John drove to the Target. If Kelsey had car trouble, maybe she was still in the parking lot. Maybe something simple had gone wrong, and she was just waiting there, unable to reach them for some reason. But when they arrived, there was no sign of her, and no sign of her car. They began driving around the surrounding area, growing more desperate with every block. And then, on one of their sweeps through nearby streets, they pulled into a shopping center parking lot directly across the road from Target, a Macy's parking lot. And that is where they found it. Kelsey's car, sitting there, apparently undisturbed. But Kelsey herself was nowhere. That car was in a different place. That was a bad signal. The words Greg used when describing that moment carry the weight of a man who understood immediately, with the cold clarity of a police officer's mind, that this was no longer a situation where his daughter had simply lost track of time. He told everyone to stay back and called the police. 4 hours after Kelsey was last seen, detectives arrived and began a careful search of her vehicle. Inside the car, they found her purse. They found the wrapping paper and the gift she had just bought for John at Target. They found no signs of a struggle inside the vehicle itself. But as investigators examined the exterior, something immediately caught their attention. A piece of fabric protruding from the trunk. The family held their breath. Everyone held their breath. They hoped she was in it, but prayed she was not. When forensics opened the trunk, Kelsey was not there. Greg Smith dropped to the ground. Police formally opened a missing persons investigation. Detectives began interviewing Kelsey's family and friends. Formally opened a missing persons investigation. Detectives began him as a potential person of interest initially, which meant Greg and Missy were brought into an interrogation room. Greg, the cop, understood exactly what was happening. He looked at his wife and told her plainly that they were both suspects at that moment and that they needed to answer every question clearly and completely so investigators could clear them and move on to finding whoever was actually responsible. Kelsey's boyfriend John also came under immediate scrutiny. In cases like this, attention almost always begins with whoever was closest to the missing person. John had spent most of his time with Kelsey in the days leading up to her disappearance. Investigators pressed him hard, asking the same questions over and over, phrased differently each time, watching for any crack in his composure, any inconsistency in his account. It was, he said later, like having his mind torn apart. But John remained calm. He remained consistent. His story never wavered. And it quickly became apparent to investigators that this young man had absolutely no idea what had happened to the girl he loved. 8 hours into the investigation, police still had no leads, no witnesses, no suspects, nothing. Kelsey's family refused to wait. Greg, Missy, John, and Kelsey's siblings mobilized hundreds of volunteers, splitting them into groups, handing out stacks of printed missing person flyers, going door to door through the neighborhood, asking everyone they encountered whether they had seen Kelsey. The community response was staggering. People who had never met the Smith family showed up to search. People who lived blocks away, strangers, became part of something that felt, in the darkest possible way, like family. Statistics about missing persons cases are brutal in their honesty. The first 48 hours after someone disappears are the most critical window. After that point, the chances of finding a missing person alive drop sharply with every passing hour. Everyone involved in the search knew this. Nobody said it out loud. More than 12 hours after Kelsey disappeared, investigators finally gained access to surveillance footage from a camera positioned in the parking lot where her car had been found. Police reviewed hours of video. At 9:17 in the evening, 2 hours after Kelsey had last been in contact with anyone, footage showed a car pulling into that Macy's lot. Someone got out calmly and walked away, but the image quality was too poor to make out any identifying details. A frustrating dead end. There was a brief, agonizing moment of false hope when a security camera at a nearby restaurant captured footage of a young woman who appeared from behind to match Kelsey's description. The family rushed over to examine it, their hearts racing, their hands probably shaking. They watched the footage. They stared at this girl, sitting with her back to the camera. It was not her. Then investigators turned to the 40 cameras inside the Target store itself. If Kelsey had been there, those cameras would have captured her entire route. And they did. Frame by frame, officers tracked Kelsey's movements through the store at 6:54 in the evening. They watched her walk in. They watched her browse at a relaxed, unhurried pace. They watched her pay. They watched her exit. Everything appeared completely routine. A young woman on an ordinary errand. Nothing alarming. Nothing unusual. The detectives were stumped. The following day, 24 hours after Kelsey had vanished, police brought a team of specialists into headquarters to go over the Target footage again. 10 officers reviewed the recordings repeatedly, looking for anything that had been missed. At first, still nothing. Kelsey walks through the store. No one approaches her. She pays. She exits. She walks around her car, opens the door, gets in, and drives away. And then, someone spotted it. Just before Kelsey settles into the driver's seat and pulls the door shut, there is a movement. Rapid, barely noticeable. Someone darts behind the vehicle from the left side. The camera angle does not capture the full picture, but the movement is unmistakable once you see it. After a brief 12 to 15-second pause, the car backs out of its space and drives away. You could have heard a pin drop in that room. Everyone stopped. Everyone looked at each other, and someone said what they were all thinking. It's kidnapping. Investigators had to tell Kelsey's family what they had found. They had to look these people in the eyes and tell them that their daughter, their sister, had been forcibly taken, that she had not run away, that she had not chosen to disappear, that someone had been waiting for her. That feeling of powerlessness, Greg said, came back like a wave. There was nothing he could do, nothing any of them could do except trust the investigation and keep searching. With this new understanding, detectives went back through the Target footage again, this time with a different question in mind. If someone had abducted Kelsey in that parking lot, they had likely been watching her inside the store first. So the officers looked not just at Kelsey, but at everyone around her. And there he was. Each time Kelsey appeared on camera, a young man in a light-colored t-shirt and dark shorts appeared as well. He kept a careful, deliberate eye on her. He followed her movements through the store, matching her path, maintaining just enough distance to avoid drawing attention. When Kelsey approached the checkout register, he made his move, heading purposefully toward the exit, clearly positioning himself to get outside ahead of her and wait. Investigators needed a clear image of his face. They needed something they could use. They got it at the store's exit. A short hallway between the outer and inner doors was covered by a downward-facing camera, and it captured his face in sharp detail as he passed through. They finally had something to work with. About 25 hours after Kelsey disappeared, Law enforcement released the suspect's photo to the media, a slim white male with short cropped hair. They appealed to the public for help identifying him. What followed was an overwhelming and in some ways counterproductive response. Roughly 2,000 tips flooded in. Following up on all of them would have taken at least 2 weeks, time that did not exist. So investigators went back to the footage one more time, this time asking a different question. The footage from the Macy's parking lot showed someone leaving Kelsey's car at 9:17 in the evening. If that person had walked back to Target to retrieve their own vehicle, there might be more footage of them doing exactly that. At 9:22 in the evening, 5 minutes after Kelsey's car was left in the Macy's lot, a dark-colored pickup truck pulled out of the Target parking area. The timing was significant, and if this truck had arrived at roughly the same time as Kelsey, the cameras should have captured that too. They had. At 6:55 in the evening, just 1 minute after Kelsey arrived at Target, a dark blue pickup truck had pulled in. The driver was visible, blurry, but enough. A white male with short hair, wearing a white t-shirt. 3.5 days after Kelsey Smith vanished, detectives had a vehicle and a description. What they needed was a name. It came from an unexpected direction. A detective answered a call from someone who said simply, "I know who the guy is on the video." The name he gave was Edwin Hall. Within a short time, a second call came in, then a third. 2 people who knew Edwin Hall personally, one a coworker and one a friend, independently identified him from the released photographs. Both were completely certain. Edwin Hall, the owner of a dark blue pickup truck. Police moved immediately, but by the time officers reached Edwin Hall's home, he and a woman identified as his wife were already loading boxes and bags into a vehicle. They were preparing to leave. Whether Hall had seen his own face in the local papers and understood what was coming, or whether it was coincidence, officers did not wait to find out. Edwin Hall was taken into custody on the spot. His fingerprints were recorded, and the questioning began. The one question that mattered above all others was simple. Where is Kelsey Smith? During the interrogation, Edwin Hall tried to construct a version of events that kept him out of the worst of it. He admitted, when confronted with the footage, that yes, he was the person seen following Kelsey through the store, but he insisted his reason was superficial. He said he found her attractive. He liked the way she looked. He claimed he had no direct contact with her after she left the store. Then the fingerprint results came back from the lab. One of Edwin Hall's fingerprints matched a print found on the seatbelt inside Kelsey's car. Confronted with that evidence, there was nowhere left to hide. Edwin Hall admitted the full truth. He had spotted Kelsey and followed her. He had tracked her movements inside the store. He had positioned himself outside, waited for her to return to her car, and when she approached, he moved. Armed with a handgun, he forced her into the vehicle at gunpoint and made her drive away. 2 hours later, Edwin Hall returned to the Macy's parking lot alone. He left Kelsey's car there, walked back across to Target, got into his own truck, and drove home. Kelsey had been with him for 2 hours, and then she was gone. 4 days after Kelsey disappeared, police obtained her phone records and used cell tower data to track the last known location of her phone. The records showed that at 7:56 in the evening on the night she vanished, her phone had connected to a tower near Longview Lake, a wooded park located roughly 20 minutes east of the Target store. Investigators launched a search of the area immediately. After 45 minutes, the lead officer on the ground called back to headquarters. They
We're searching for an 18-year-old girl who was carjacked and abducted on Saturday
and strangled to death. Greg and Missy Smith were at the end of their driveway when the news reached them. Missy screamed, "Not my Kels! Not my Kels!" Kelsey's siblings arrived moments later, pulling up to see their parents sitting on the back of a pickup truck, completely devastated, and knew before anyone said a word what had happened. One of Kelsey's siblings dropped to the ground and screamed, "No." There are no words adequate to this moment. There are no words adequate to any of it. Edwin Hall was charged in connection with Kelsey Smith's murder. He initially faced the possibility of the death penalty, but he entered a guilty plea. In the end, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In the courtroom, the exchange was brief and stripped of any drama. The judge asked how he pleaded to the charge against him. Guilty. One word. One word to answer for everything he had taken. During the course of the investigation and its aftermath, investigators asked Edwin Hall whether Kelsey was his first victim. They asked specifically whether he might be responsible for other murders in the Midwest. His answer was that he had never killed anyone before. that this was the first time. Greg Smith, the off-duty cop, the father who had done everything right, who had raised a daughter who called when she was going to be late, who had mobilized an entire community in the hours after she vanished, who had stood in that police headquarters room as investigators stared at footage trying to make sense of what they were seeing, heard that answer, and said what his instincts as a law enforcement officer told him. He believed it was a lie. Whether Edwin Hall had harmed anyone before Kelsey, whether there are other families out there still waiting for answers about someone they lost, remains an open question. One that, depending on what investigators may yet uncover, may never be fully resolved. What is not an open question is who Kelsey Smith was. And that matters. That matters enormously, because in cases like this, the details of the crime can sometimes overshadow the person at the center of it. The case becomes a procedural puzzle, a surveillance footage analysis, a timeline of movements and timestamps. And the 18-year-old girl who wanted to be a veterinarian, who put balloons on her friends' lockers, who called home when she was going to be a few minutes late, can get lost in it. Kelsey's friends remembered her plainly and without embellishment. Awesome just to have met her. If I could text her right now, they said, the message would be simple. I'm sorry, because she was there for people. She was the kind of person who showed up for you, and losing her meant losing something that cannot be replaced. Her family said she wanted to be remembered for the way she made people feel, not for the way she left the world, for the way she lived in it. That is worth holding on to. The key evidence in this case was the surveillance footage captured by 40 cameras inside a Target store in Overland Park, Kansas, and the cameras in the parking lots around it. That footage did not prevent what happened to Kelsey, but it provided the thread that investigators needed to pull. It gave them a face. It gave them a timeline. It gave them enough to make an arrest within days, at a moment when the trail might otherwise have gone completely cold. For families and investigators working missing persons cases, the significance of that footage cannot be overstated. The Kelsey Smith case became, in the years that followed, a landmark example of how surveillance technology can be used in abduction investigations, and it is part of the reason that awareness around the use of cell phone tower data in locating missing persons gained such traction in law enforcement communities. Kelsey's family did not sit and wait. They called news stations. They organized search parties. They put her face in front of as many people as possible as fast as they could. And while none of that could bring her back, it built the kind of awareness and community mobilization that has since informed how families and law enforcement approach the critical hours after someone goes missing. Edwin Hall sits in a Kansas prison today, sentenced to life without parole. He will not walk out of that building. Whatever he may or may not have done beyond what he admitted to in that interrogation room, whatever answers he may be withholding about other cases, other families, other names, he is not free. And in the specific, limited way that the justice system can offer something called resolution, that is what the Smith family received. But resolution is a strange and inadequate word for what a family carries after something like this. Greg Smith, the cop who spent those agonizing hours calling police departments and driving through parking lots and standing in a headquarters room watching surveillance footage frame by frame, described the moment he understood his daughter had been taken as a feeling of complete powerlessness. A man trained to respond to crisis, a man who had spent his career being the person who shows up when things go wrong, was standing at the absolute edge of what he could control, and there was nothing there. Missy Smith screamed at the end of their driveway, "Not my Kels." Kelsey's siblings dropped to the ground. And somewhere in a wooded park, 20 minutes east of a Target store in Overland Park, Kansas, they found a girl who had graduated from high school 9 days earlier and was supposed to go to college and become a veterinarian and keep on being the person who made everyone around her feel wanted and seen and included. She was 18 years old. She went to Target to buy a gift for the boy she was dating because they were celebrating 6 months together. She was there and back in 10 minutes. She never made it home. What happened to Kelsey Smith is a reminder, not a comfortable one, and not one offered without full awareness of how inadequate the word reminder is. The danger does not always announce itself. It does not always look the way we expect it to look. Edwin Hall, the man who followed an 18-year-old through a store and waited in the parking lot for her to return to her car, did not look, on those store cameras, like a threat. He looked like another shopper. He moved carefully. He kept his distance. He was patient. That patience, that deliberateness, is what makes cases like this so difficult to prevent and so important to talk about. Because awareness, Even when it comes too late for Kelsey, might not come too late for someone else. Kelsey Smith is not remembered for the way she left this world. Her family made that clear. She is remembered for the way she lived, for the way she showed up for people, for the energy she brought into every room, for the friend she was, for the daughter she was, for the person she was on her way to becoming. She wanted to be a veterinarian. She was going to Kansas State. She had just graduated from high school 9 days before a man followed her through a Target store and changed everything forever. Her name was Kelsey Smith, and she deserved so much more.